Very warm welcome everyone here in Skellefteå at the Human Rights Days, Rättighetsdagarna. We have a great panel to look forward to about just transition in the food system. Welcome also everyone online. It's amazing to be able to also see this seminar afterwards. My name is Louise Lindfors. I'm Secretary General for the Solidarity organization Afrikagrupperna, and we are one of the organizers of the Human Rights Days, but also the organizing organization for this amazing conversation that we will have on this very important topic. So, as we are now well aware, many of you have visited different seminars today and conversations and interesting stands where civil society gives you vibrant reality checks on what's going on around a just transition. We know that the human rights and the possibilities to achieve true democracy and also to be in the forefront of democracy worldwide is depending on basic human rights, such as the right to food. Even so, the food system today has so many flaws. The system is somewhat broken, as we will discuss today with these distinguished guests. So even though the produce would be enough to feed all human beings alive today, we still have famine, we have food shortage, and we have malnutrition. Almost 735 million people today suffer from that. Specifically, this is visible at the African continent, and it's a good example to think about the richest continent in the world that would be self-sustainable multiple times if it wasn't for the system. And we will talk about the food system and what the problems are, what the obstacle challenges are, policy-wise, also in terms of financial structures, neocolonialism, extractivism, climate change, etc. But we will also try to orient ourselves towards the solutions and to try to be the change we want to see. And this is why it's so amazing to introduce this panel, because they represent a global perspective and geographical wide span. But also you have so many common features in all your struggles and in all your work. So it will be amazing to start by listening to the different panelists and hear about who you are, what you bring to the table in this discussion, like why you are here. You don't have to tell your whole life story, but just like 3, 5, 4 minutes about what is your driving force and motivation and what made you work towards a just transition for food or the right to food in your respective countries and domains. I think we'll start with introducing Christine Nabwami. Did I get it right? Almost. Christine is a small-scale farmer from Uganda. So she has a very hands-on practical experience and daily life in terms of producing food in a sustainable way. Can you please introduce yourself a little bit and your activism also within La Via Campesina?
Thank you so much. I'm Nabwami Christine, a small-scale farmer from Uganda, as well as a farmer leader. I do agricultural production, both for home consumption and for the market, and I produce both cash crops and food crops. What brings me to this space is to raise the farmer's voice, being deprived of our rights and the struggles that we currently go through, whereby we have to come out, speak out strongly so that our voices are heard and solutions are found to see that a farmer has that equitable consideration in the work that we do. So I'm here to share with you what we go through, how we are fighting with getting back what is ours, that is the rights that we have to enjoy, and to see that we are also felt and our work is not to waste, but being recognized at all levels.
Thank you so much. And in your corner, you also have your fellow activist, Brenda. Brenda, you're active within La Via Campesina that I mentioned, which is a rural global movement that focuses on sustainable food production, but also climate issues, the right to say no to extractivism and different struggles that are linked. Yeah. You come from and are based in Zimbabwe. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
My name is Brenda Muronda. I'm based in Zimbabwe. I work with La Via Campesina, Southern and Eastern Africa. As Louise has just mentioned, that La Via Campesina is a global movement of peasants, small-scale food producers. We are just one region. We have about 9 regions within the global movement. So La Via Campesina Southern and Eastern Africa is the region that is on the global south of Africa. So a lot of our work is on peasant rights, food sovereignty, the struggles for agroecology, climate justice. We also work with other allies on the Say No campaign and the struggles against the transnational corporations, which is some of our work and advocacy moves that we have within the continent. Yeah.
You are so amazing, and you mentioned now so many interesting and important concepts. So maybe we should just briefly elaborate on them before we continue with the presentations. So for instance, food sovereignty. What would you say is the difference between food sovereignty versus, let's say, food security?
Yeah, so you find that within the current global agriculture system, a lot and even discussions at global level, member states and some UN spaces, the focus is mainly and entirely upon food security, which then also supports the whole trajectory of the agriculture system, the current one that we have and that we've realized is not working, because it's not premised on the small-scale food producers, what they need, what they want. It's more about member states saying, okay, we need to take a box, we need to make sure that everybody's fed. What they're fed, how they're fed is secondary to the main goal, which is to ensure that there's food security, regardless of what we're eating. And this now plays into the whole discussion where you find that global transnational corporations and agribusinesses move and I can say can pounce on that agenda to say our main focus is on maximizing food production. And that then creates the ripple effect of all the issues that come along when you find that one of the main drivers of the climate crisis is agriculture, because it's industrial agriculture. It's making sure that we are maximizing food production and minimizing costs, all for maximum profit and not necessarily for the benefit or for the beneficiation of the global population. What we eat, if we are eating crap, it's okay, so long as everybody gets that. And you find that at the end of the day, there's famine. People are not getting access to that food because it's being produced in one country, and one country is expected to then export. Also further entrenching the crisis that we have when we're talking about the climate crisis. So all these steps that are being taken to provide food security are not really working. So when you're talking about food sovereignty, we are giving power back to the communities, back to the peasants, to say what we need. It's the power to determine what are we going to eat, how are we going to produce it, and that works so many ways in being sustainable, in the sense that it is classically tailored among different communities to provide sustainability and for them to determine how they are going to be producing, and the whole holistic approach towards ensuring that the environment is not harmed through the production process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
And on that note, it's such a good transition towards the Sápmi region. And Aili, Keskitalo, you also work at Amnesty in Norway, but you also represent and talk about the Sámi rights. And that is a very strong linkage between the right to the land and to the resources that the land produces, and also the cultural rights to the place where you live and where you harvest, where you grow your food or have your production. Could you please tell us a little bit about your position and your work?
Yes, thank you. Before I started working with Amnesty Norway, I was a Sámi politician, a Sámi leader. I've been working within Sámi organizations and the Sámi Parliament, and also the international indigenous cooperation for more than 20 years. And I also followed the food system process as a politician. So I come into this with both a human rights perspective, but also about a knowledge about indigenous food systems and what indigenous peoples are trying to achieve. And you are perfectly right. The right to food is also connected to the right to land and resources, and to the right to culture, and to the protection of nature. And to follow up what Brenda told us about the food sovereignty, it's also about, I'm not fighting for the right to go to the supermarket and buy a pizza, frozen pizza. No, I'm fighting for the right for our people to eat their own traditional food. Because that is the food that is produced on our land. So it makes sense. It's more climate friendly, it's more environmental friendly if we were able to eat the food that our land produces. And it's also more cultural appropriate. So as a Sámi in the Arctic, I will probably never suffer from hunger. But I could lose the right to choose to eat the food and to provide within our culture the food that we need and want. And that is a matter of food sovereignty. And another point about food sovereignty is that it's like there are always decisions taken elsewhere that affect our food systems. And when you were both talking, I was thinking about what the Inuit, another Arctic indigenous people, experienced with the ban on seal products. That was I think it became an European Union initiative, which affected Inuit food systems seriously, because they were not able to sell the byproducts of the harvesting of nature they were doing themselves. And in the Arctic, we cannot grow all the crops that you can grow in Africa. So to get our food system is built also on hunting and fishing and reindeer herding. And if we are going to live sustainably, we have to do that. We cannot grow beans or rice or avocado. We have to use the food sources in our close areas. So I think food sovereignty is also about the right to get fed from the nature you live in, and not always have to rely on somebody else producing your food and flying it in from other parts of the world.
And speaking of producing food, Olga Grönvall Lund, you're activism because you have an activist, but you also have an entrepreneurship linked to it. So you're somewhat of a social entrepreneur. But it was linked to, or it started a little bit in food production, in a sense. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this activism?
Yeah, but I would not say I'm an activist. I would say I'm a realist instead, because combination. But anyways, I don't come from like a producing food side, more of like preparing food side. So I'm from Stockholm. I'm grown up in a family which like come from like a farmer background and also forest background. So I have the knowledge about food from a very like early stage. But then when I was a kid, I didn't like sustainability because that was very boring with all this great packaging and so on. But then I moved to Berlin when I was 21, and then I always loved to host events because I think it's so sad that people sit alone today and they don't belong to a community or look forward to something. So therefore I love to host gatherings. In Berlin I accidentally started my first company, which was a sandwich community. Because almost everyone can relate to a sandwich. Like it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, no matter if you're a good or a bad chef, or whichever culture you come from. Like people can connect over a piece of bread with topping. But then when I was running this sandwich community that turned into a company, then I realized how fucked up the food system was from a business perspective. Because we wanted to work with produce from healthy soils and good ecosystems. And I love to cook, so we wanted to cook everything from scratch. But today we live in food systems where people don't want to pay for food anymore. So it was really hard to make a business. But then my dad got very sick in cancer, which made me spend a month in a hospital. And during that month, I observed the food that was served in this hospital. And then I realized, like in Sweden, our tax money goes into financing the food in the hospitals. And then I realized that the food that was served in the hospital is like cancerogenic, leading to the depletion of the soils and destroying the ecosystems. So that, from that anger and sadness of how the reality was looking, then I started Reformaten, the organization I lead or contribute to today. So, and we do so many different initiatives to work with the food system. And we really speak about it from a holistic perspective and address the health of the people, planet, and animals, all different dimensions of the sustainability. And we try to focus on mobilizing the mobilizers in initiatives that work preventative instead of reactive. So very solution driven with different things we do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we'll come into that, like
What's the name?
Reformaten.
Reformera maten. Reformaten.
Reform the food, so Reformaten.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just have to point out that there's an error here on the display. So the conversation goes on up until 16:30. So we have an hour. If you're wondering about the pace, we will cover this hour. We won't make it on 30 minutes to fix the food system, so that you know. Speaking of these different policy levels, and I think we'll try to travel from like this kind of level into more solutions, like what can we do? Christine, you recently been present or representing at the COP for biodiversity, and you have been in other COP meetings as well. Can you please share a little bit from your perspective, coming from your own small-scale farming and bringing things to the table in those negotiating space where the multilateral fora takes place?
Thank you so much. I've been privileged to attend the COP meetings, and my primary initiative or my primary objective is to see that at least I take the farmer's voice from the ground to that big space, because that is where we have to air out to make the comparisons between what these legislators, big legislators, think and what is actual at the ground. And in this COP platform, all generations were represented. And this represented gave a picture, what the children think, what women think, what the youth have, the forest gatherers, the people who live at the coasts, and we had a combination of a conversation that this is the farmer's perspective. So while there, I'm sorry, I'll give my submission from a local perspective and then to that global perspective. At a local perspective, we are talking about issues of restoration. What has been lost, what we call the biodiversity loss. We want to restore back because it's affecting our food system in a way that it is no longer manageable to a farmer. It is not cost effective to a farmer because we do this daily practice whereby we use our hands. It is labor intensive mostly, but if we can't profit out, if we can't benefit what is equivalent to the labor we incur, then it is not sufficient for a farmer. Then we also talk about issues of protecting. Everything has been lost. We don't have the systems of protection, but we have the knowledge of maintaining and sustaining. But what is lost today is it's not a farmer's knowledge in protecting, but we want to sustain and improve more what we are left with, because now the knowledge we have is indigenous. And for this generation, indigenous knowledge has been put to trash. They didn't consider indigenous knowledge being the most beautiful knowledge that we needed. It is coming to reality that was the beautiful natural knowledge that could apply to agricultural production. So we are putting this to the international space, that what you underscored before is what is working out best for us. And the other issue is documenting our initiatives. As farmers, we are trying out local initiatives to see how it can speak to us, to see how best we can come out with our production that interests us. So our local initiatives are now becoming the solution to our challenges, to the struggles we go through at farm level. And our initiatives are like, that is too local for national consideration or international consideration. But it was too pleasing to me that as we reached COP, it were like just a language issue, but speaking about the same thing. Like when I talk about the business hub, they are talking about the agro-hub technologies. It is exactly the same technique, but having a different what? Name. And we talked about the agroecology community schools. At that level, they are talking about the agroecology living labs. But the practice is the same. So I think it is just the twisting, the terminologies that are making it slightly different. But when you go into the details and the depth, I got so interested and I was so pleased that what we are trying out is what is now put at the international scene. So I think the appreciation and the consideration for farmer initiatives has to be documented, because we are now going back to doing the actual practice we found our ancestors doing that we tried to lower down. So that was working for me. Then secondly was when all categories of people came out to speak. You know, the platform was for how is it for the children? And we had young children who came to say, please, don't break don't break the climate. Don't finish breaking because we have a generation to live. And we are also like, you know, we are coming. We are the next generation. But if you destroyed this now, then what are we supposed to do? Where are we going to live? The youth were like, trust us. We have the energies to restore back, to bring history to table. There are technologies we can no longer afford, but the youth are ready to take on the technologies, like to research back and then tell us that we went to these books, we consulted this, and we are now telling you this is the research that we come out with, considering the indigenous knowledge. And for us, the women, we are like, you know, we are the managers of the food systems. Yeah. We need to be considered at that level. Finance us, bridge the gaps. Don't crack, but just bridge the what? The gaps. So the forest gatherers were like, you know, life comes from the forests. You have to protect, conserve back, because it's so funny. In my country, there is that practice of finishing this space, leaving this to show that this was once a forest. But behind it, it is already demolished. And you know, it is funny. While you're passing the roadside, you're like, we have this forest still in place. But if you've moved inside the forest, it is empty. Some industrial agriculture is taking place. So that is also contributing to the depletion of the food systems. And then we talked about regulating the conventional inputs. That is where the problem, all the problems we are facing come from. The introduction of this was like, I think our governments are thinking they are making too much taxes and accumulating so much wealth through giving those producers of conventional inputs the mandate to come and sell in our countries. But that is the generation of the problems we are facing. Conventional inputs have depleted soils. Conventional inputs have taken away our seed. Conventional inputs have destroyed our food. Actually, the only good thing that we could think is coming out of the conventional inputs is producing in masses. You just produce what is too much for you, but that is the only positive issue we could think. The rest are negative to us. So with the depletion of the soils, food systems have been affected. And here we are talking about the food being a human right. Food has to be safe. It has to be with the diet that we require from it. It has to be healthy, because I'm realizing we need to include the talk of health in all these scope issues. It has not yet come out so well. So the food has to be healthy, that when you consume it, you know you consume something that has to contribute health-wise to you. And it has to be nutritious. You know, when we cook food, as you're preparing food, you feel that scent, the smell that comes out of the food. Talk about the conventional food we produce. You're like you're picking a stone to put it on table. No scent, no smell, no good anything. But for the food that we are supposed to eat, you know, it has to tell you that this time they are preparing sweet potatoes. This time they are preparing bananas, and you just feel like the appetite is raising. So we need to see that at least the conventional inputs are regulated. Actually, we as small-scale farmers, we don't need them anymore, because now we are talking about the promotion of the indigenous production of food. So we want to see that we have a project that is working on documenting from when you're weeding the garden, you're planting, of course, with the indigenous seed. We still have those people who can identify the seed, the characteristics, the nature, the way it appears. So to planting, from planting to doing the weeding, the harvesting, the restoration, and the cooking. So we have to show this young generation, this is how they used to cook this food. Don't overspice, don't overput things, because that is where we are suffering from. And I'm bringing that at a farmer level. When we go to the international level, the COP level now, things stand the other way. Because now we are telling them that, do you recognize that farmers' rights have been deprived? Do you agree that we are now moving under legislated systems? And these legislated systems are affecting the food sovereignty, are not working out for us, and at some level you can't even enter market. Because in the market it is regulated. By the way, we come about bragging, we have organic food, and whom are you speaking to about the organic food that you're bringing to the market? You're bringing the organic food that is of this size. They are bringing the conventional production that is of this size. And to a level peasant's understanding, what is big. So we have to, we have to bridge that gap. This small-sized thing is what you need, not this big-sized thing. So we are telling them, okay, the difference is there, but this is what we want. So we had to articulate this so much that these spaces needed to know we want to appreciate back what belonged to us. Secondly, we are asking, can you commit? Can you commit? Because these discussions have moved for a long period. If we are talking about the COP16 for biodiversity, we are talking about COP29 for the climate justice. What is it that is halting the system, not mandating it to implement? I think everything has been talked about. Everything is already on paper. What we now need is the implementation of what we've talked about for the past 29 years. So today, we are asking for implementation. And with implementation, we want that implementation that is inclusive of the indigenous communities and gender-based. Because implementation shouldn't be like the international scene is saying that this is what has to be done. It doesn't have our voice. And for us at that local level, we are like, it is us who own the land here. Do your things up there, and we shall also do what we think is right for us. So we are at different crossroads. We are doing other things here. The international scene is also dictating something else. So we want them to at least commit that they need us, they should include us, and all what is going to be done, all what is being put on paper should have inclusivity of the marginalized and then the underrepresented people. And thirdly, we are articulating about funding the indigenous people's initiatives. And when we talk about funding, you know, when they come for these negotiations, they're like, okay, we are committing to this figure. We are committing to this figure. By last COP, we had generated a huge sum of money. We went back and waited to see how is this money being utilized to our benefit. They are now into COP29. I've not seen anything that is where funding has been projected to. I've not seen anything. But for us, what we want is a bit little, basing on what they have. We have the farmer-financed initiatives, whereby we have just community, we call it the village savings and loan schemes. It is at a farmer level. It is just within the community, within the members, and you do it at a scale whereby it is not hectic for a farmer. When we go for those loanings, for those big loan schemes, okay, even what they call the small loan schemes, first of all, the percentage of profitability becomes a challenge. The requirements, the collateral, you know, the whole process, you can apply for it today and it takes you 3 months off season already. And it's no longer of use to me. But the one that is a village scheme, you come, like you're even there, and you remember that, okay, I had to get people to help me clear this place. So you just come to the group and you're like, people, I need 200,000 to clear my farm. And you know you're guaranteed to get it there and then. But if you go into these processes, that's where the hardest story, the hardest part of our financing comes. We don't have the collateral. When it comes to women, we don't even have the mandate to own land, to have some of these things like set for us. So the channels of acquisition, the processes of acquisition, and the too much bureaucracy in the system is a hard part when it comes to a farmer's work. So we are telling them, if this money is meant to do this for us. Why don't you channel it down to us so that we begin seeing these meetings speaking to us? But till COP29, the meetings are not yet speaking, the negotiations are not yet to the indigenous community's understanding. And
I will stop you there because it's such an amazing recognition of how important the process is, both and what you bring to the table as well, because you have already mentioned now the importance of representation, of accountability, and of how indigenous people's voice and rural voices needs to be also at the table. And I think you also displayed it in a very good way. But I wanted to take the opportunity also to mention or to elaborate on the indigenous people's rights, because that's something that it definitely speaks to each other, mentioning the global north-south dynamic, but also to see the relevance of what we could call local solutions, like local practice that is an answer or a solution to a global problem. And it would be so interesting also to feed in from the Sami perspective at this point.
Yes, certainly, because we hear a lot about sustainability, about
the green transition.
Yes, and sustainable food systems. And to me, and as I listen to Christine as well, it seems like somebody is trying to fix something that wasn't broken to begin with. We have food systems, indigenous food systems, that have been sustainable through centuries, maybe thousands of years. And now it seems like somebody want to break them, to build something else that is supposed to be sustainable. But why can't we take care of what we have already, which have fed people, fed our peoples for a very long time, and which have worked within the ecosystems that we live in? So it's like some kind of mindfuck, that we are fixing things that shouldn't be broken to begin with, and that's a big frustration. But I think it comes from again, like Christine said, some kind of lack of acknowledgement of the indigenous knowledge. That indigenous peoples and other peoples as well they know their ecosystems, they know and have tried how to work within those the limits of the ecosystem, and have succeeded. But then somebody is trying to impose upon people something else and calling it sustainable, but it probably is not.
No, exactly. The thematic around just transition always, or it seems to be more and more centered around but for whom, and also the concept of development becomes very problematic when you look into the different stakeholders, how governments interact, how the money speaks also in terms of those negotiations, and also in the COP meetings, for instance. And as soon as it's a conversation around loss and damage funds, for instance, as in the previous COP, the negotiations keeps on going forever, and they can't make an agreement. And I mean, the statistics is already there. The research has spoken already. I think it was Johan Rockström mentioning that we don't need any more COP meetings. We actually just need to implement what we already know. That would be the solution to the climate crisis and to the biodiversity loss. But still, we need to keep on focusing on solution. And Olga, you mentioned earlier that Reformaten is an organization that focuses on, what did you say, 95% on solutions and 5% in problems?
That's like in my mind, how you have to focus.
So these solutions, like what is the toolbox? How can we fix the food system?
I think it's like so important to address there is so many different food systems, and it is the global conventional one that is like causing the issues we're at. And when we work in this question, then like we speak about the health of the kids, the health of the whole population, both the one producing the food, also the one consuming the food. Then also the health of the nature and the animals and so on. And different perspectives is interesting for different kind of persons. But when you bring this holistic perspective, then you will find some topic that will interest the one that you speak with. And for us, like, I love life. I think it's super fun and tasty, and I think everyone like should be able to feel that way. I think like we fail completely when we don't make that possible for everyone. And by creating settings or infrastructures or alternative places where you unite the eater and the producer, then you come to different, like we have to eliminate all the middle hands. That's the solution, you know, like when I go into, I don't say supermarket, I say super bad markets, because I think they're filled with shit. And also, like, if you buy something that is not filled with pesticides in a super bad market, then the farmer will still receive so little part of the money. The most will go to the shelves and the package. So in these models, as soon as we enter into the super bad markets, we have failed. So we have to like look on different alternatives, infrastructures. And there is so many different models of this, different shape of community kitchens, different markets, different like more community-run food systems. And right now we're speaking so much about the issues and the problems, but so little about the solutions. And the solutions exist everywhere. You just have to open your eyes. So if we would instead like bring the funds that are needed to the solutions that already exist and scale up those alternatives and put our effort and highlights on those instead, then we would solve this quite fast, I think. Like that's my perspective at least. So I think it's so important to like that we put a good amount of spotlights on the solutions that is existing. And this topic with how like to document the knowledge, that's like one of the most urgent thing I feel, that the knowledge about how we take care of soils and landscapes sit in people's, like in their mind and hearts. And that knowledge has to be stored really fast because that is so valuable. So, but in our organization, we also work with how can we make the conventional global food system as less harmful as possible, as soon as possible? Because another thing, like in Sweden at least, like 51% of the population is overweight or obese. That costs the society 125 billion a year. That's 2% of the Swedish BNP, and that's the same amount as we put on the military. So if you look on the economic consequences of the issues with the food system, it's really bad as well. So if we would take those money and make people not sick of the food we eat and put them into solutions, like then we have so many solutions existing already. Yeah.
So it's a zero-sum game, but the stakeholders, the players, need to level up their knowledge and be a little bit more, raise their awareness. So we have talked now about that the just transition might also endeavor some kind of false marketing labeling of stuff. And Brenda, you do work with, you work as a communication within La Via Campesina. And we have now mentioned also, for instance, agroecology as something that is a practice that you could trace it thousands of years back. But still it sounds like a new concept that maybe we should try this out, and it's branded in some way. What would you say from your perspective would be the key issues to make this holistic perspective that we now have touched upon more accessible for everyone, everywhere?
I think a lot of what Olga was saying and Christine around, first, a lot of our work now is going into documentation and also putting that knowledge out there. like to be easily accessible online in different languages. We within La Via Campesina CF right now, we have a primer that we developed around peace and agroecology achieves climate justice, which, as well as the UNDROP, the declaration that Christine was talking about on the rights of peasants, we have endeavored to, these we have in the colonial languages, like in English, French, Portuguese, but it's not as easily accessible in terms of some of the communities, our local communities within the region. So our next step was, let's work on making sure that these documents, these really great documents, are in languages that are easily accessible. So we have had a process where we were doing translations into national languages. So those documents are available in like 12 languages within the region that are national languages. I know for Uganda, we have Luo, we have Luganda, and those documents are easily accessible, meaning that at least within their community, Christine can be able to take those documents and be able to raise awareness and also share those documents amongst the communities so that they are also aware, and it also becomes a point of advocacy when engaging, because what she was talking about, that you find that even some of the local elected leaders or duty bearers are not aware of that information. They don't know. It's something where the states can say, we've ratified the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants, but it has not yet cascaded. And when Christine comes in and talks about that, it's also a new area for the local elected leaders.
Yeah. So
you'd find that learning or that process of also awareness has to go both at the peasant farmer levels, as well as the local duty bearers within that area. So it's one of those key issues that we've been also realizing through our work, that this knowledge needs to be also shared horizontally amongst farmers, as well as the allies and elected duty bearers within those areas or within those communities and those countries. So it's one of the issues or points of advocacy that we've been engaging in to make sure that the knowledge is spread wide.
So Olga, you wanted to comment also on something. Yeah.
Like, I think we have to educate the food system about the food system. It's like so crazy because like we sit in so many discussions with like researchers or public agencies or NGOs or blah, 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 blah. And they work with one perspective. So they say, everyone should become vegan. And then like, then we have to lower the carbon emissions. Yeah, sure, we have to do that like globally. But if everyone becomes vegan and eat non-organic avocado from Mexico, like then we will end up in other issues. So the ones working with the food system have to be educated or maybe get a driver license within the food system before they do their solutions, because their like silo solutions is fucking up the other people's work. So if we don't start to address this holistically and people that should be educated are really educated, then it's very hard. But for that to be able to happen, then we have to raise awareness among these Christians from like everyone should be aware of this. Like when I walk around here, super few people speak about food. Like it's like they have their specific question, but if they would learn more about the food system and what kind of solutions the food system can bring, then we would solve many of their issues as well. So, like that is like food is fun, tasty, it's unite people. And right now the world needs to get united. Like this kind of situation, the polarized situation we're in, it's looking really dark. But we have to unite around solutions and bring people to the table, eat, cook, and do real activities together. So that's my
And
education.
from that very engaging, you said you're not an activist, but I'm not sure. From that engaging perspective, I thought we'll end this panel discussion by doing like a round where you can mention, say, 3 things that you think is important for anyone, anyone. Imagine someone that you want to direct your message to, or mention anyone. That they can do in order to make these implementations, to raise awareness, to higher the level of engagement for different stakeholders, to push the limits when it comes to policy, advocacy, lobbying, and negotiations within the UN system. You name it. We have so many layers now of possibilities. So if we, as a panel, as a group of representing also very different perspectives, could give a message to anyone, what would it be? We start from here, Olga, because you're already worked up.
To make people, because we have to do system change, so people have to go from individual to system thinkers. And this is a human right question. So we have to educate people about their right to live in food systems which enable health and sustainability for all. So it's more about like highlighting the human rights in this. I think that.
And like for just preparing a sandwich, what could one do? Like
I would like search out like what is a good farmer, what kind of grains. I always work with the things that are locally and sustainably produced. So I don't follow recipes. I get ideas from recipes, but I use what is around me and get to know a farmer. And also like everyone is needed in this transition, and it's extremely urgent, like it's super urgent. So no matter what kind of talent you have, if you're a photographer, if you know policy, join a movement with your talent and say that I can help you with this. I have a camera, I can write, I have 10 hours this week, can I help you harvest something? Like instead of saying like, I need this, think about what can you contribute with. And when we start to do that, the emotions get emotions and then things happen.
Mobilization, okay. Aili, what are your 3 key?
Well, we started earlier talking about food sovereignty, and it's a matter of self-determination. So to governments, I would say, respect indigenous people's right to self-determination, to self-determine what kind of food systems would serve their people, their culture, their health. But on a more local or personal level or whatever, I would say sometimes governments should do less because maybe what they are doing is not always the right thing. And when they impose regulations that makes it difficult to uphold traditional knowledge, traditional ways of preparing food, which would make us estranged from the local environment that we are living in. That is a big risk. So to everybody, I would just say, learn what grows and what food is in your close environment, because we are losing the knowledge about what grows just outside our doors. There's food everywhere, and we should take care of that knowledge.
You mentioned now also that like a spiritual level of something, that a knowledge that we bear that could also be spiritual, but also concrete in terms of water will also grow. What is your key messages, Christine, for us to take with us?
My key messages are, in the first place, let every person, let every individual in their different capacities, beginning from the local communities up to the international communities, let us do this philanthropic work of massively and aggressively supporting the agroecological transitions in our food systems. Do anything that you can, support in any way that you can, to see that we can move to the transitional food systems. Secondly, I would beg the international platform, let it come from the talks to implementation. We've had enough of paperwork. Let it now come to implementation. Then thirdly, this could go to the farmers, the custodians of the interconnectedness in the food systems. Let us do our best to restore, protect, conserve, and sustain our ecosystems. Those are my key messages.
Amazing. Brenda, what would you like to send out?
I think all the other speakers have kind of like shared my sentiments. I'm going to steal from Olga what she said about everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be like a food producer, but whatever talent or whatever capacity you can support the movement with, please be free to actually join a local movement, also support with whatever talent that you have. And then in terms of policy, it's, I feel like we have so many good policies on paper and nothing that translates to implementation on the ground. It is always the policies and the briefs that have been developed, that have been finalized, and do not have funding. It doesn't translate to real positive action in the communities, to the farmers, to the small-scale food producers who are the people that are feeding the world. So we need to move from, like what Christine is saying, from talking about policies, from writing them, to actually implementing. So because normally where your purse is where your heart is. So if we're not financing those good policies, those agroecology policies that states are crafting, are developing, it just means that we're just doing lip service. We're saying, okay, these people are talking a lot. Let's just, you know what? Let's just tell them this is going to work, but we're not going to be putting any money in that. So for me, those are my greatest takeaways.
It was so amazing and inspiring to listening to you all. And what I will take with me from this panel is a lot centered around like the historical, like the knowledge that we bear, the traditions of generations before us can be translated into innovation. Innovation doesn't need to be something new. It can be actually speaking truth to power and mobilize around the practice that is already there. And the food system has so many layers, but there is something for all of us to engage in and possibilities to actually make a difference. And we see now that the food system is contributing to almost a third of the pollution, like emissions, carbon emissions for the globe. So of course, and we all eat every day, most of us, hopefully. That is a human right at least. So, I mean, that's the purpose for humanity to survive. It's to have food, and therefore, thus, we have within our range of power to actually make a difference. It has been amazing. The time is out now, but I think maybe you can linger around here, if possibility for the audience to pose their questions to you afterwards. Thank you so much.
All right.